One of the things I like to talk about Jack Kirby is just how long and significant his career was, from 1941, from the creation of Captain America, and how huge and significant that was, having Captain America punch Adolf Hitler on the cover of the comic long before Pearl Harbor. It was kind of a bold, patriotic move because of Kirby's, again, his mixing of art and his actual experience fighting five guys on a sidewalk in the ghetto of Manhattan. Really was able to draw these great action sequences in Captain America. So that was something that really made that comic book so exciting. And that was in the early 40s. Then in the late 40s, after World War II, he and his partner Joe Simon were looking at the newsstand and seeing that there were all these true romance pulp magazines that all the ladies were reading, and they realized that they should make comic books for these ladies to read, and they invented romance comics, and that's what got Jack Kirby out of Brooklyn into the suburbs. Like, that helped him fulfill the American dream, drawing stories about the human experience in that way. And then kind of the combination of those comics kind of really brought it all to happen for the baby boomers, for the Marvel comics in the 60s. I mean, I think that a lot of times we don't talk about how significant it was that when Kirby and Lee and Marvel came out with those action adventure stories of heroes with human foibles, was like when the baby boomers turned 13, and how the baby boomers kind of stuck with them for quite a while. It used to be that comic books were a 3-year experience for people. They would start reading them at some point 8, 6, 11, and they would read them for 3 years, and that would be the end of it. But they somehow, like Stan Lee, helped convince the readers that their comics were for college students. So if you were 13 years old, you were kind of inured to the idea that you could possibly read these comics for 10 years, and they did. You know, that really helped bring about, at least on the newsstand, this idea of people reading comics for longer than just the 3 years. And the other thing that talking about the newsstand was that the newsstand comics, which, you know, they were everywhere. They were in candy stores on the corner. They were, you know, all in the supermarkets and the drugstores. But that whole distribution network just started failing because comic books were too inexpensive, and the people who were in that business didn't want to sell them. It was just too much of an effort to sell a 35-cent comic book. So that business just started failing, and that's when the kind of fan businessmen took over, and that's the comic book business we have now in comic shops. So that when you don't really see comic books on newsstands, you see them in comic shops. I think it was pretty significant when Jack Kirby published a comic book through that what they call the direct market channel. It was 1982, I believe, Captain Victory, that some folks in California decided that they were going to publish not just underground comics, not just like, you know, the Freak Brothers or Wonder Warthog or Zap, but actually present some kind of action adventure, superhero-like science fiction comics done by people who used to work for Marvel or DC. And Jack Kirby was one of the first. And I think that really, his effort, his agreeing to do that really helped that other channel, the non-newsstand channel, actually flourish. And in light of that too, he also was pretty significant in helping the comic book conventions develop, like the big convention in San Diego. He'd moved to California from Nassau County, and met with some fans and gave them a lot of advice about what he thought a comic book convention should be. And they took his advice, and he was always there as a guest, and really helped that convention become what it is. So there's, not just the comic books, but the cultural side of it and the distribution side of it, that Kirby really had a pretty significant influence. And when I'm standing at a comic book convention at a Jack Kirby museum booth, a lot of times I'll just say, well, we're in Jack's house now. Or, not only am I the Jack Kirby Museum, but we're kind of all the Jack Kirby Museum right here. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Jack.